I'd now like to introduce the next session that we're about to have in the professional stream here. We're going to welcome Dr. Allan Nelson and Catherine Christian to the stage. They're about to present a session on Caused. It's a model for a team approach to understand and respond when people communicate unmet needs through their behaviour. And just a reminder that in the community room right now is the Huntington's disease clinical trial landscape with Dr. Kelly Atkins. So if you're after that one, that's in the room next door. But for now, would you please make welcome to the stage Dr. Allan Nelson and Catherine Christian.
I'm just going to ask my team of helpers to come and join us on the stage. I never like to do this stuff on my own. It's good to make other people suffer with us, I reckon. Thanks, people. I'll introduce them to you when we get a bit closer to what we're going to talk about. So thank you for the introduction, and Caused is a model that we've found helpful with our team. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that in a minute. But first I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Kaurna people, of the land that we're standing upon today, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And also I'd like to just say thank you to the people with lived experience present here today and also online. And thank people who have been so generous to share their stories with myself, with my team, and continue to teach me about Huntington's disease and what it's like to live with it. So Caused, we're thinking about changed behaviours for people with Huntington's, and we know that there are many ways that people can display those, I guess. But first of all, understanding what changed behaviours is. So any behaviour or mood that is distressing to the person with Huntington's or those who are around them. So it's a form of communication reflecting emotion or unmet needs. It is sort of an AKA many other things, I guess, over the years that we've known them as problem behaviours, challenging behaviours, responsive behaviours. I guess the reason I like the term change behaviour is that it has less of that negative sort of wording about it, but also it's recognising that something's different for the person, and we want to understand what that's about so that we can help. So there are lots of ways that people might demonstrate that something's not quite right, and I think everybody here's got a fairly good idea about that. So the purpose, I guess, of supporting people around reducing changed behaviours is really to improve quality of life at the end of the day. And we do that by reducing the distress that a person's experiencing. And in the process of doing this, we support and strengthen relationships around people. If we don't think about addressing or reducing changed behaviours, there are obviously some negative outcomes that can occur from that. So thinking about the increasing distress that can happen for people, the escalation of harm to self or others potentially, the damaging of relationships longer term, and ultimately decreasing the quality of life and wellbeing. So what we see if we're not thinking about how to reduce the changed behaviour or the stress that's involved is an increase in that stress across the day, leading to greater distress. And I guess the thing I like to think about in this as an analogy is boiling milk. So most of us have boiled milk at some point over the day, and we realise that if you increase the heat, keep increasing the heat, the milk comes up to a point where eventually it boils over. If we can intervene earlier, we can stop that boiling point from happening. And I guess that's what we're aiming to think about with this Caused model. So cumulative stress is like that boiling milk. Instead of applying heat, we're applying triggers across the day until we reach that point where the emotion intensity is so high that we see a changed behaviour. So evidence has shown that non-pharmacological approaches are our best tool, really, for reducing changed behaviours. So sometimes medication can be helpful, but I guess what we're looking at the team is how we can support people in other ways to reduce that stress that's accumulating over the day. So obviously it's really important to have a person-centred approach. So we want to really understand the person with Huntington's and their needs. Having a team collaboration helps to share not only the responsibility for looking at what might be possible and understanding what's happening, but being able to share what one person knows. None of us know everything, including the person with Huntington's is able to identify everything that's going on around them and what might be helpful. So that team collaboration becomes really important, and then it's also possible to share the responsibility for assessing what's happening along the way, what's been helpful, what hasn't been helpful. So how do we come to be thinking about caused in this space? So caused is a tool that was devised in the dementia care area by some nurses back in the day, 2008, which doesn't seem that long ago, but who were working in dementia training, and that's continued to be used a lot over the years for training people. And in 2017, we had a colleague come to work in our team who'd been working for Dementia Australia for some years, and her name was Kathy Billinghurst, and she had come using this tool and looked at the space that we were working in with people with HD and thought that it might be useful here too. And certainly we've found it to be that way. So what is caused? It's a problem-solving tool. It helps family, support workers, healthcare workers, anybody around the person with Huntington's to be looking beyond the presenting behaviours and thinking about what's causing them. It shifts the focus of the behaviour being difficult or a problem to thinking about the fact that the environment can be unsuitable for supporting the person with Huntington's. The acronym encourages holistic consideration of the person in their life context, which I'll tell you about a bit more in a minute, and it enables the identification of what might be modifiable triggers that are occurring across the day. And it aims to develop and implement support strategies specifically designed to meet the cause of the unmet need and the changed behaviour. So it looks kind of like this. If you look into the model, it's represented in different ways, but you know, us being a bunch of social workers, we like circles. So, so this is how we think about it in our space. So you can see that the person with Huntington disease is in the centre of the thinking about here, and that's done on purpose because the process here is thinking about what's gone on for this person. It's not really thinking about what's happened to the rest of us as a result. So we really want to understand what's happening for the person with Huntington's and why things have changed. So we look at different areas like communication, for example, whether the person's been understood or misunderstood, or they've misunderstood a messaging to themselves, you know, whether they've had enough time for processing information. So that's an example of the communication type questions that we would be asking. When it gets to A, we're thinking about the activity, what's been going on around that person that might be influencing the changed behaviour. We also consider whether the person is unwell, what their unmet needs might be, that's U. S is for story, which is really missing the HI in front of it. So what's the history for this person that's relevant today? So some people might come with a history about of trauma that is influenced their behaviour at the moment, for example. E for environment thinks about not only the physical environment of where the person is situated and what they've got access to, but also the social environment, what's going on with the other interactions around that person. And then we have disease as a little d, and the reason for that is because we all know people have got Huntington disease and we can't change that, but we do need to have a look at this through the Huntington's lens, understanding the symptoms that people are experiencing and why that might be influencing what's going on as well. So basically we want to ask lots of questions before we come to thinking about the answers and solutions. So it's a brainstorming process, thinking about possible triggers. Someone told me recently that apparently Einstein was said to say that if you had a problem to solve and was given 1 hour, he'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and everything related to it and 5 minutes about solutions. And that's kind of a good description of what we're doing here with this tool. So then you go on to identify possible triggers once you've done that, planning strategies, trialling strategies, and reviewing the impact. And then you might start all over again. Okay, so who's in the team? I put the person with Huntington's at the top because I guess when I've read about cause, that hasn't been a main element of the discussion that I've been reading about. But from my perspective, people with Huntington's really need to be contributing to this conversation in some way too, or have the opportunity to do that. And I think it's really important that when we get some ideas about what's happening, we check back with the person concerned and make sure we're on the right track as far as they're concerned. So I really see that there's a role for them to be involved, and we can be creative with that person as to whether that means sitting down with the team or whether it means having a chat first with one or two people and having a chat again later. That's quite a variable element. Today in our team, we have Dr. Allan, played by Allan. Jess is going to be both our occupational therapist and our physio for today. Caitlin is going to be the support worker. And Leslie is going to be Brenda, the wife. And I'm probably going to have to be the social worker right at this point. So I'm just going to run through that. First of all, I'll let you know about the scenario. It's completely fictitious, so if you think it's about you, you'd be wrong. So Bob is 52 years old. He's lived with his partner Brenda for 25 years. He's the father of 2 children. His own father had Huntington disease. Bob used to be a chef, and he had to retire about 10 years ago due to the challenges of his HD symptoms and working in a stressful environment. So recently, Bob moved into a 24-hour supported accommodation. And last Monday, the support worker reported that Bob threw his lunch plate at her. So just for the record, the workplace has dealt with that element with the staff member. We're not touching on that today. What we're concerned about today is thinking about what's been going on for Bob and how we might help him to not reach that point where his pot of milk has boiled over. Okay? So what's gone on here? Pressing the wrong button. So thinking about the cause model, we would be starting with the questions about communication. We've got limited time here today, so we're going to have a very, very brief version of this. But rather than me talking about it all, the team will do that job. So you'll see the possible questions flash up, and then you'll see as we're doing the talking some of the answers to the situation for Bob. So wearing my facilitator hat now, and I'm going to ask if we can start, team, with the support worker telling us what happened on Monday, and particularly remembering what communication was going on. And you might have to check that the microphone works.
Aha, thank you. It was my first day in the house with Bob. Things had been going okay, and I didn't have any trouble understanding his speech. I let him know his lunch was ready. When he got to the table, he suddenly flipped. He swore and pushed the plate away so hard it hit me, and everything fell onto the floor. He immediately went back to his room and shut the door. Later, Bob had calmed down and came out of his room and apologised for making a mess. I asked him what had happened, and he said it was just all too much and he lost it. He didn't really want to talk about it anymore.
Okay, thank you. And just putting my social worker hat on. So I spoke with Bob the next day. I came to see him to have a chat about how things are going with moving, because he's obviously going through a lot of change lately. And I was talking with him just about the food and how things are going from a different perspective. And Bob said that he really hates peas, which came as a bit of a surprise to me. Anyway, because they're my favourite. He said that he gets really frustrated when he sees them because he's just not able to keep them on the fork and get them to his mouth. So what happened the day before was just that last straw for the day for him. And when he'd seen the peas, it's just, can't do this. And he left the room. And he really didn't mean for the plate to go off the table, it was just getting it away from me. So with that in mind, we're going to think about the activity itself. So I'm wondering, team, besides seeing peas on his plate, is there anything else about lunch specifically that might increase Bob's stress?
Yeah, so I'm his OT, and I've been working with Bob to trial some aids that might make life a bit easier. as he's been frustrated about spilling his food and drinks. The cutlery and a sipper cup have arrived for him to try. He looked at it, but he said he doesn't actually need it yet, and he needs some time to think about using them before he starts.
I am sorry, I actually didn't realise that. I had put them on the table with his lunch.
So what else happened that day leading up to lunchtime that might have increased Bob's stress?
Well, I did get Bob up really early to be ready for his physio. He said he was tired and struggled to get moving. When he came out for breakfast, the housemate fell over and I had to call an ambulance. Bob ate his Weet-Bix but didn't have time to drink his coffee.
As his physio, I noticed he was a bit tired and distracted during our session. He said he didn't sleep well last night. Bob kept on stopping the activity to tell me about how his housemate fell over this morning and they had to call the ambulance. Normally when I leave, Bob likes to go back to his room for a rest, but Brenda arrived as I was going.
Brenda's Bob's wife.
I dropped in unannounced because I was driving by with our dog and Bob loves to see him, so I just called in. Bob was excited to see Bluey. I left because lunch was ready for Bob.
Okay, thank you. So if we're thinking about, there's lots of activity going on for Bob that morning. It's been a pretty full-on time. Can we just check in about whether he was unwell or what other unmet needs might have been happening? And thinking particularly, Caitlin, as the support worker, how was Bob actually looking by lunchtime?
I guess he was really tired and quite hungry. He was a bit unsteady on his feet and his movements were all over the place. I think he was quite distressed about his housemate falling, as he kept telling me that he'd gone in the ambulance and asking if he was okay.
He does get hangry if he doesn't eat regularly.
We know this is a thing, right? Yeah. And Dr. Allan, is there any reason to think that Bob might be sick at the moment?
Look, it's great to have this role as the doctor, and I'd like everyone to know that I feel comfortable with the minimal role that the doctor has in this. Physically, Bob is well. His recent chest infection's cleared up and his antibiotics completed. He hasn't changed any medications for the last 6 months. He's been on the same antidepressant for years and a mood stabiliser for 12 months. We have got PRN available if it's needed.
Thank you. Okay, so a few things there to keep in mind about unmet needs for Bob. And so now we get to the point of thinking about Bob's history. Is there anything about his past that might affect his sleep? Because this seems to be a big issue for Bob. Brenda?
So Bob was a chef and he has always gone to bed late, around 2 or 3 in the morning, and struggled to get up before 11 a.m. The last couple of years he has been up a lot during the night, getting something to eat or going to the toilet. He was often falling over when I was asleep. In the end, I couldn't get enough sleep and keep him safe at home.
Bob's routine at the moment is to go to bed at 9 p.m. because he's too tired to do anything else. He doesn't usually get to sleep though until 2 a.m. He gets up 3 or 4 times to have a snack or maybe to go to the toilet, and then he sleeps solidly normally from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m.
Okay. So we're not coming up with solutions yet. We're thinking about things that we might be able to alter or support Bob with. So, before we go on to the environment, I've gone too far. Does this work to go backwards? There we go, back to the story. So considering that Bob's dealing with a lot of changes lately in his life, I wonder how he's coping with change and what things Bob might be worrying about. Brenda?
I think he worries about us coping financially and our kids and possibly having the HD too.
Mm-hmm. Social worker hat. I've been chatting to Bob and he's told me that he often lies awake worrying about things at night. Whilst he'd rather be at home, he does say, Brenda, that he understands that you were getting really exhausted and he was concerned about being a burden for you. He says that he's getting used to living here. So thinking about the environment, we're not going to actually go through this process for the rest of this, but while we were talking about the other elements and brainstorming, some of the things that we came across also fitted into environment. So remembering that we're thinking about the social impact of what's happening. So stresses for Bob, include what happened to his housemate that morning, falling and being called, having the ambulance called, but also the things that are on his mind and his difficulty with sleeping. One great thing about the environment is that Bob has space to go and cool down and to have that time out when he needs it, so that's great. And then thinking about Huntington's in this space and having our lens on, we know things about Huntington's, like the extra movements are potentially making a person tired, or we can see that with an escalation of extra movements, that is also a change behaviour in a sense and an indicator that things are not right for that person. So all of these factors are important in our consideration for thinking about what might be modifiable. So if we just go back to the cumulative stress and thinking about what we've heard from, thank you team, from your feedback. Thanks, Daryl. So starting off, Bob's day was already exhausting, right? He hasn't slept well overnight. He is feeling sad about the changes that he's having to make at the moment. He is worried about his kids having HD, and these are long-term things that are present for Bob every morning when he gets up. So in addition to that, he was faced with a brand new support worker, and we know that change is difficult for people with Huntington's. And it's difficult to develop a relationship with someone quickly. He had to get up early for physio, he had to miss his morning coffee, and none of us like that, right? So, and he had to rush, and we know that rushing is also unfavourable for people with HD. So he did manage to get through his physio, but he's feeling really fatigued by this point, and so his capacity for managing these stresses is diminishing as the day goes on too. And what we do know for people who have cognitive impairment is that managing stress is much more difficult, and there's a lot lower stress threshold. So he has a surprise visit from Brenda and Bluey, which he really, really loves, and that's great. So that's relieved that pressure for a little bit, but when they go, he's still very tired. So it hasn't been a lasting effect, and he's had no time for his usual rest period. And so when he sees the sipper cup on the table and he's not ready for that, and he's not ready to think about using that, that's agitating, but seeing the peas on the plate are the absolute last straw. And what I want to say about the peas on the plate is that is a very small and simple thing that can be changed, but if that is all that we change, if we never serve him peas again, we will still see a changed behaviour because all of these things are having that cumulative impact. So just thinking about modifiable triggers, not everything in our day is changeable and stress is inevitable, but if there are things that can be prevented, like general strategies that we're very aware of, like using routine and timing things for people to have rest, etc., that can really be a game changer for a person in helping to reduce their changed behaviours. So this is just a list that I am not going to talk about, and you can look at later if you want to, but just ideas. Now I'm going to hand over to Allan.
Thank you, Catherine. Great presentation, and thank you for allowing me to participate in that. And you'll be hearing from my manager and Actors Equity. Yeah, no problem. First of all, I'd have to say that isn't it wonderful to have an Australia-wide conference for HD and to have so many people here in the room and online. And it's also really wonderful the work that HA are doing in terms of that advocacy at a government level and at a national level. This is absolutely brilliant. Why don't you give them another round of applause? And I'd also like to add my sense of appreciation for all of the people with families affected by Huntington, and in particularly the people who have willingly participated in trials as we move towards trying to find a treatment that is truly disease modifying. So also I'd like to, can we express our appreciation for those people? And now we move on to the part which really does show how insignificant the doctor is in all of this, which is fine. I'm comfortable with that, as I already mentioned. What I'm going to talk about, oh, by the way, I was going to be given either 2 minutes or 5 minutes. What is it, Catherine?
Whatever's left.
3 minutes. Okay, so I'll move through this quickly. But the idea here is medications aren't the first port of call. The only medications that we have available now are symptom modifying, not disease modifying. So I'd like to take a quick excursion through how you would use these in a rational and thoughtful fashion. I'll just go through a quick list of the groups of medications that we tend to use in Huntington. First of all, there's the benzodiazepines like Valium, lorazepam, temazepam. There are the antidepressants like sertraline or Zoloft, but there's about 12 or 13 of those. There's the antipsychotics like amisulpride, olanzapine, clozapine. There's a number of others as well. And tetrabenazine, which is one for dampening the movements. And melatonin we tend to use a bit as well. So I won't talk about the details, although I love to talk about the details of those and how we use them. What I want to talk about is the broad general approach that you would take for using any of these medications, which are psychotropic medications, in anybody, but also how you would use them with someone with Huntington. And remembering the aim of this is to improve the life of the person we're using them for. That's what we're aiming to do with these. So the first point about this is, and I haven't got time to explain the reasons, but every time you use a psychotropic with someone, it is an N=1 trial for that person and that medication. And the reason for that is the genetics around this is so complicated. Genetics in Huntington, one gene, one alteration. Let's say schizophrenia, bipolar, more than 300 different gene variations. So just take it from me. It is a single trial of this person with this medication, and it's the genes that mean that everyone reacts differently. There are genes to do with how quickly things are cleared, interactions with other medications. I could go on, but I don't have time. So the trials that are done, the evidence that's available, that provides you with what might be the most likely thing to be of assistance. It doesn't give you any guarantee that it's going to help this person, but you can rationally choose the best option to try. And what you do is you introduce that particular medication in the lowest possible dose, while you attempt to hold everything else constant. And of course that's impossible because life doesn't stay constant, as we've already heard about with Bob. There's all sorts of variations in what happens. But you start with the lowest possible dose or the lowest possible dose change, hold everything else constant, particularly other medications, and you hold that long enough to differentiate between some random variation and a medication effect. I could start a new medication today and tomorrow I might hear that this was the best day this person's ever had, and I might think that was because of the medication, but it's quite likely it wasn't. It was quite likely just a random change. But if I start this medication and I check in a week's time what's happened over that week, or in 2 weeks' time, then I might get a sense that there is a sustained change that I might be able to attribute to the medication change. Now, this is a tricky business. It sounds easy, but it's not easy to get a sense of what is a sustained change and what's happened. But that's the rational process that you would be undertaking. And the changes that can happen, there could be no change, there could be a beneficial change, or there could be a negative change, or there could be some combination of positive and negative changes. So at the end of this period of time of observation, then if I'm approaching this rationally, I'm going to talk to the person with Huntington, probably their carer or people involved in their care, and try to determine what's happened here. And I haven't got time to tell you exactly how the algorithm works, but it's pretty straightforward. You would only continue the medication if on balance the positives outweighed the negatives, and you would only move ahead with increasing with certain parameters, that you would stop it if certain things were occurring. But in this way, repeating that, you will titrate to optimise the dose of the particular medication that you are paying a focus to there. And that might be the end of it, but you then might think about something else that might be worth trying. Now, of course, the decision about do we undertake the first trial or do we undertake subsequent trials is a discussion. It's not my decision, it's really the decision of the person with Huntington and their carer about is this worth doing, and do they want to undertake that. And so that brings us to Catherine to wrap up. Thank you.
Just a few references and some free training that's available online if people want to look more at caused or at Huntington's and thinking about change behaviour. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much to Catherine and Allan. That was a bit loud. Also, thank you so much to Jess, Caitlin and Leslie for playing your roles well. Allan, I look forward to your Logie nomination. That's in the mail. Thank you so much, everyone. Also, a really engaging chat, just delivered in a different way. So it was a really interesting journey to go on to and just see the different layers, not only in medication, but obviously in the environment and challenges people living with HD face. So thank you so much for your time up here.